welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating theory, one that pretty much turns the whole idea of how a digital asset gets its value completely on its head. So let's just jump straight into the deep end here. The entire theory we're exploring today hangs on this one single radical idea. What if, instead of markets fumbling around trying to find a price, we're all just waiting for a price that's already been decided to be, well, to be revealed? And here it is. This quote from our source material is really the heart of the whole thing. It suggests this isn't about the usual market chaos or speculation. No, it's about a very deliberate, calculated decision made by some incredibly powerful players who needed an asset to have a specific, very high value for a new global system to even function. Okay, so that leads to the obvious question, right? Who are these strong groups? Who are these alleged architects pulling the strings behind the scenes? And what kind of massive problem were they trying to solve that would require such a, well, such a secretive and drastic solution? Well, according to the source, the architects of this grand plan aren't a couple of guys in a garage. As you can see, we are talking about the absolute pillars of global finance, the IMF, the BIS, central banks. I mean, these are the institutions that literally control the flow of trillions of dollars across the globe every single day. The problem they supposedly pinpointed, it's basically the broken plumbing of global finance. You know, the current system for sending money from one country to another is ancient. It's slow, it's clunky, it's incredibly expensive. This theory claims these institutions knew they needed a brand new kind of bridge asset to fix it once and for all. Now, this is where the theory takes a really sharp turn. It reframes a huge public event, the SEC lawsuit against Ripple, not as an attack, not as a regulatory misstep, but as a calculated, strategic piece of the puzzle. This timeline lays out the alleged strategy, step by step. So first, before 2020, you have the quiet accumulation phase. Then, bam, December 2020, the SEC lawsuit hits. This creates massive public fear and uncertainty. Exchanges start delisting the asset, and while the average person is selling, the theory claims the big players use this as cover to keep on accumulating without sending the price to the moon. So the crucial takeaway from this perspective is that the lawsuit wasn't a bug. It was a feature. It was a smokescreen, a way to buy time, to let the infrastructure get built out, and to let the right players get their hands on the asset before the new system was ready to go live. And all of this, every single piece, is supposedly building towards this fundamental change in how we even think about this asset. It's about changing its very definition, and because of that, changing how it gets its value. This chart just explains the argument perfectly. The source claims XRP was never supposed to be treated like some tech stock, valued by hype and news and squiggly lines on a chart. It was designed from the ground up to be infrastructure. Think of it like a highway or a global data cable. Its value comes from its utility, what it can do, and the fact that the system absolutely needs it to work. Okay, to get the next part, we've got to quickly talk about collateral. It sounds like a boring banking term, but it is absolutely critical here. See, when a bank officially accepts something as collateral, it's not just a tradable thing anymore. It becomes a foundational piece of the whole system, used to back up enormous loans and financial deals. And this quote from Ripple's own chief technology officer, it just flips the whole normal way of thinking on its head. For a speculative asset, you want it to be cheap so you can buy more. But for financial infrastructure, a higher price is actually more efficient. It means you need way fewer tokens to move huge amounts of money, which cuts down on friction and risk in the entire system. So, let's put it all together. If the theory is that these giant institutions are gobbling up an asset whose very purpose requires it to have a sky-high value, then what's the endgame? What does the theory say happens next? Well, the logic leads to something called a supply shock. As these big institutions supposedly lock up their XRP as collateral on their books, that supply is basically taken out of the public's hands. It's removed from the open market. This makes the available pool of the asset shrink dramatically, right at the exact moment its global utility is supposed to be switched on. So, the final price isn't about retail FOMO or some crazy bull run. No. According to this theory, the price becomes a mathematical necessity. It just has to be high enough to back and settle the quadrillions of dollars sloshing around the global markets. It's a number that comes from a calculator, not a crystal ball. And the source we're looking at, well, it claims that numbers this high aren't just wild speculation. They're actually presented as a functional requirement, the price that's needed to make the math work for a stable, efficient global system. And that is the final, really provocative question this theory leaves us with. It completely shifts the conversation away from when will the price go up to what happens when they flip the switch on the system. If the price is already set, the big event isn't a market rally. It's a system repricing, a revelation, not a